Okay, it's going to be a fresh episode, friends. We're going to clarify some comments from Kyrie Irving that essentially confirms what most Nets fans and people around the NBA should have already known, his status regarding getting vaccinated. And then, though, the bulk of the episode is around Doug Norrie's not altogether 0% concern that the Nets have some issues in securing a playoff spot. Is that a tempered presentation, Doug?
Yeah, we tempered it. I explained it. Look, it was for me. It was 0% a couple weeks ago, and it's not 0% anymore. It's not.
It's still 0%.
They're gonna miss. Yeah, no. We'll get the whole explanation here. I think it's a good one. We'll go through the Kyrie thing, go through some of these numbers, what to look for the rest of the season for the Nets. Take a comprehensive view. Gonna get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
Hey, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I am Adam Marmbick. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're free on all those great platforms. And remind you that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out PrizePicks.com and use promo code NBA, or go into your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Doug, we're going to get into Kyrie Irving's post-game comments and clarifying where he stands going forward over the remainder of the season. And then, in terms of the season, maybe some potential concerns that you're looking into regarding the Brooklyn Nets and those playoff opportunities. But first, how are you on a Wednesday, sir?
Yeah, buddy, I'm good. I wish that we didn't cover the Kyrie. I'm glad we're going to talk about these Kyrie comments because we jumped on our pod right after the game on Monday, and then we kind of picked up the presser stuff as it came in. So I'm glad that we're going to cover this. We're not going to spend the whole episode on it because there's not a whole episode's worth of stuff to talk about here. But yeah, let's get into it because he had some pretty interesting comments to Nick Friedel specifically and some other reporters that were kind of pushing him.
Yeah, so obviously this comes on the heels of Kevin Durant officially being out. We know the timetable, 4 to 6 weeks. That can be loose at best when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets. But Kyrie Irving, among other things, was asked, what does it feel like to have now Kevin Durant go down? And then ultimately getting to the point of, does it adjust or make you reconsider getting vaccinated to be available for home games? Kyrie said in response to it, that's what I think comes into a lot of culture in basketball and sports and entertainment. You bring in teams and you bring in situations. Kev's going to heal. Kev's going to be okay. And we're going to have to deal with this as his teammates. But in terms of where I am with my life outside of this, I stay rooted in my decision. And that's just what it is. It's not going to be swayed just because one thing in this NBA life that somehow it's brought to my attention as being more important than what's going on in the real world. It's just not happening for me. He did go on to say, just to make sure we give the full context, again, I respect everyone else's decision. I'm not going to ever try to convince anyone of anything or anything like that. I'm just standing rooted in what I believe in. And though we're dealing with this right now with Kev, I just know that I'm protected by the organization. I'm protected by my teammates. I'm protected by all the doctors I've talked to. And I just stand rooted. There's one more quote here around it, but in general, I'll close out with that one. Essentially, it's confirming what I think most people that have been covering or following the team knew, that Kyrie Irving was not and is not planning on getting vaccinated at any point. And he believes strongly in that stance. So there'd be no reason why, just because someone gets injured, even as high profile and important as Kevin Durant gets hurt, it would almost seem disingenuous if he turned around and did get vaccinated at this point, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, this lays to rest any thought that the Nets had or Nets fans had around him, reversing his decision here. This pretty much put that to bed. I think that there's no reason to even ask him. I mean, reporters probably still will going forward. It's kind of just probably to fulfill their own journalistic either needs or something else, because the answer is just going to be this answer. I don't think this is going to change. I don't think this answer is going to change at all. And so I think that we as Nets fans and Nets folks can basically just say, this is just what it is. He's like the road to him getting back to being on the court full time is that the New York City law that's not a law. The mandate has to change, or the Nets need to reverse their decision about breaking the mandate, which they're not going to do. So, so that's really kind of, if you're rooting for something regarding the Nets, you are now only rooting for the mandate rules to become more lax, which there's no sign that that's going to happen. Now, look, I will say one thing we've learned is that, 2 years into this mess, is that things can just change, right? And so, like, the world in June might not, or May might not be what it looks like now in January. So I don't think we can project out that things will just be like this forever. So I think there's a world where the mandate changes, but but from the Kyrie portion of it, I think this, at least for now, it's pointless to keep asking him. Like, you're just going to get the same answer. Again, folks probably are going to, but it'd be like just knocking your head against the wall. Like, there's no point.
And I'm good. So just to close out his comments on it, because he went a little bit further beyond it, because he was pressed about his vaccination status and regarding about his playing time, obviously. That's what I'm saying. Irving said in response to it, you're bringing my vaccination status into a basketball game, and I have my life the majority of the time when I'm away from this. So when I say I'm not getting vaccinated and I'm not making a choice, and I'm making a choice with my life, somehow it gets mixed into, well, what about basketball? When it's like, no, bro, just to give it full quote, we live in the real world. It's great to be able to do this. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I love being with my teammates. I love playing on the Nets, but I've already been away enough time to think about this, to process it, and to be able to make this decision. Stand strong, understand people are going to agree, and some people are going to disagree. The circumstances that are at our hand, I'm praying that they get changed and that we're able to do things differently. And that's not just for me. That's for all those who are dealing with being unvaccinated and getting fired from work on a day-to-day basis. It's not just about me. That's been my message this whole time. So though I feel your feeling and emotion for asking that question, it's just like sometimes it feels a little disrespectful. I'm not just a basketball player, bro. Millions of fans. I appreciate all of it, but it's just not about the game. My only takeaway from it is genuinely that he is going to get pressed about it over and over again. And I understand the media side of it and needing to ask the question. It's the same way that we have to at least contextualize this and discuss that he did make these statements and he was asked the questions. I actually thought that Kyrie handled it the right way.
You can't say he wasn't flippant about
it. He didn't blow past it. He didn't refuse to answer it. He accepted it, acknowledged what has to happen in this exchange, gave his response, and I think hopefully, I think he probably did it in the way of thinking, and maybe we won't have to have this conversation again. I'm sure we will, but hopefully we won't. And I think probably everyone, like at least for me, I hope everyone, this doesn't have to happen again, because it's a fruitless conversation, and I think at a certain point it does speak to, and we said this before, when it comes to media, and we are pseudo a part of it, at a certain point, there's something disingenuous or disrespectful in the idea of like, no, I know you said that, but I'm going to ask it again, and I'm going to ask it again, and maybe I'll ask it again just to see if I can either get a different response or possibly elicit a little bit more of a visceral reaction that then leads to an opportunity to write a bigger, better article. I think is a little bit a part of this I do take away.
Yeah, you can't disagree with anything he says on like just a personal level. He's right in to say that his decisions get couched in a basketball terms, and he's not saying that he's going to make decisions just strictly around basketball. So if you want to respect that, I can't disagree. Like, everyone knows where I stand on this. Like, go ask the question of the people that made this mandate. Like, that's go ask them next. Like, that's where I stand on it. So yeah, I just don't think that there should be further discussion about this. Because at least from the Kyrie side, it's just not going to change. The team's not going to reverse course and have him stop playing now either. So this is just the situation as it is on January 18th. Like, look, as we've known, by January 25th, everything can be different. Like, this stuff changes with the tides. So, but as of right now, like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, there's just no reason to keep asking him, because you are just going to make everyone pissed off, and it doesn't do anything. Like, it doesn't give you any more information. Hold the thought. Let me just hit PrizePicks real quick, because I think we got some other stuff.
I wanted you to do, so let's get into something even more delightful for the Nets fans. Some of your concerns around the rest of the season.
All right, yeah. Look, if you haven't gotten on the PrizePicks right now, I don't really know what you're missing. They're the best DFS prop operator around. It's actually not even close. It's super easy to use too. You can go through the DFS PrizePicks app, the mobile app, or on the website, and all you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and you're picking the over under on their projections. And these other sites, you got to go up against guys putting in millions of lineups. You're trying to fit in salaries. You're trying to do all these other machinations, not on PrizePicks. It's super easy. It's just you versus the projections. You pile together 2 to 5 players, starters. They got some bench guys too, if you're really deep in the NBA weeds. And you pick the over under their projections. You could win up to 10x. It's 10 times on any entry. And it's just you versus those numbers. You can throw some flex play entries in there. You can combine sports. You pile together some NFL and NBA players into one entry. It's all there for you on PrizePicks. You go to PrizePicks.com. The users that deposit now, if you use the promo code NBA, you're going to get a free $50 play. If your entry scores a single point. So your entry is just going to score a single point. So don't worry about that. We're basically giving you $50. You got to use the promo code NBA. You go to prizepicks.com, use that promo code NBA, get that single point entry, get that $50. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy.
And hey, friends, you make us your first listen. Why don't you make Locked On Now your second listen? It's local experts working their tails off to give you all those angles on your favorite teams, if it happens to not be the Brooklyn Nets. And it's able to be done so because it's the Locked On Podcast Network. We have local experts in every single city covering all these fantastic teams, and it's free on all those platforms, just like this very show. All right, let's get into then something slightly. Let's get weird, man. Let's get weird with it, Doug, because last episode we were saying about coming out of that loss. Some comments on the YouTube that the framing of maybe my thumbnail was a poor choice, saying positive vibes coming out of a loss, because for the most part, as a first sample size without Kevin Durant, it felt like, hey, this team can be okay. Kyrie Irving is back in form fully, so you have this opportunity to stem the tide in the absence of Kevin Durant. I did say you want to keep your eyes open for the next game and the next game, because 3 or 4 losses in a row and you get a little bit concerned. You took it a layer deeper, and things that you never would have put, or things that you couched in a 0% chance at the start of the year have now at least moved away from that a little bit.
Yeah, so I said last episode that, we really shouldn't have any concerns about the playoffs at all, and that we should just be concerned about seeding, right? Like from here on out with Kevin Durant. And I think I'm going to walk back part of that statement and say, and I'll say it like this. You mentioned before at the start of the season, we said, there's a 0% chance, which is basically where the odds were that they would miss the playoffs. I think even that 0% chance stood like really pretty close to 0 not too long ago. But now, without the Kevin Durant thing, does shift a large portion of like so the Kevin Durant piece plus like Kyrie not being able to play every single game. I think it was like these two kind of dovetailing ideas.
It's had like me looking a player and a half injured in that sense.
Totally right. And so this idea that it was at 0%, I would say that it's not at 0% anymore. I don't think it's like 50-50 they don't make the playoffs.
Right.
Like, I don't think it's like, it's not a coin flip by any means. I think they're still heavy favorites. But I will say, and I'll go through some of the reason here in a second, but I will say that part of me was like not in panic mode really about Kevin Durant getting hurt with each individual game. And I think actually that's why, I feel like if I had this thought before the last game against Cleveland, we probably would have, I think I actually would have had a different tone about that podcast if I'd been thinking this now, because I think going forward, having looked at this a little more closely, I am now probably going to start watching these games. Start worrying about these games on an individual game basis a little more than I thought I was going to. And that, I think, is where some of this is rooted, where the 0% chance, Doug, that they missed the playoffs would have been watch the last game with the Cavaliers. Like, hey, we got some nice stuff out of that, right? But if this like 3% chance, Doug, or maybe a little higher, have watched that one, I think I would have watched it, butt clenched a little bit more. So I think that's kind of where I'm standing.
If the Nets go out and lose the next 4 games or 5 games, then obviously. Right. I'll start to push, I think, maybe a similar panic button. But right now in this moment, I still list it as a 0% chance that they're missing the playoffs. Now, as we know, Doug is nothing if not detail oriented. So I'm sure we didn't run this down before the show. I'll be curious to see the directions you take it. I crunched a couple of numbers on my own, but yeah, I mean, I'm open to be convinced. Not that I want to be sad, but convince me that there is a real reason for concern over the next 39 games for Brooklyn.
Okay, so a couple places to start. One is that the Nets have a negative net rating this season with Kevin Durant off the court. Okay. Now there's a lot of stuff thrown in here. There's like non-James Harden games. There's obviously no Kyrie during this time. So I get that number is going to be off a little and maybe even a lot, like, because having Kyrie switches a lot of this. But as it stands right now, the Nets have been a negative team on the moments that Kevin Durant has not been playing with the squad. And that is just the number right now. And I caveated it a little bit, but that's just the number. Losing that player hurts your team very, very, very badly. Okay. So that's number one. That's actually, but not even my biggest concern, actually. My bigger concern is that
that one's too obvious. Give me a deeper concern.
What happened? This is where it's bad. Well, this is where it gets worse. The Nets picked like the worst year for this to happen with the state of the Eastern Conference as it is. And this is actually my bigger concern. One, strength of schedule going out from here. The Nets have the 6th hardest schedule in the league in terms of opposing teams' win percentage. All this can change too with other teams and how they switch and get injured or not injured or get healthy. But that's just where it is right now. They have the 6th hardest schedule, and only 2 teams in the East are above them with that, Milwaukee and New York. The other 3 are Western Conference teams. So those, we can just remove them from like them being part of this problem. So most other Eastern Conference teams have a significantly easier schedule than them, because after them is actually a lot of other Western Conference teams, and you have to get way further down to get like to the core of the Eastern Conference in terms of how hard their schedule is. Right. So everyone else in the Eastern Conference, basically, I have another point after this, but I just want to start there. Are you worried about the strength of schedule piece? Like, the Nets' schedule gets harder right as they've lost their best player and will not have their effectively 3rd best player for a decent amount of games during this time, and they get a little lucky with the home road thing.
Yeah, well, so, and by the way, I said if the Nets were to lose a handful of games going forward here, obviously, when you look at the immediate schedule, and as Washington, San Antonio, but Timberwolves, not the same kind of Timberwolves team that we make fun of in the past. Lakers, but then Nuggets, Golden State, Phoenix, right? The Jazz, the Nuggets again, Boston on a surge. Like, even in the short term, you could see a world where the Nets go 3-7 or something in that range. So I think in the short term, you could see that. But if you're talking about strength of schedule, I'll just throw out, because, and this will lead into a bit of a future point on the back end of all this. The Nets, over the course of their schedule, the remaining of the rest 39 games, they're going to get the Knicks 3 times. They're going to get the Kings twice. They're going to get Orlando. They're going to get Detroit. They're going to get the Pacers to end the year. They're going to get the Atlanta Hawks, who are not the Hawks from last season, whatever they're going to work into. They're going to get, that's, you're getting to 8, 9, 10 games there. Now, am I saying that every one of those is an automatic win? No, but I'm still going to look at it and say, we haven't had Kyrie Irving. You're not going to have for home games, but every game on the road that Kyrie Irving and Harden play together, they are now 16-4 when they play together. They were 16-3 before that last game loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I still think that those 2 players can win you games. So when I look around the Eastern Conference and I know that I have 10-ish, at least hey, we can check these off as probably being victories and then play out the string of the rest of the games, I'm not going to be overly concerned about anyone else's strength of schedule. I'm just going to try to tread water. That's where I've always been couched in, is tread water. That's the goal here. So it's a tough road, but I will say the one other piece of it, strength of schedule obviously matters. We also know, to your point, every 4 or 5 days, something new happens, whether it's protocols for different teams, players in and out of lineups. And I think a little bit of that chaos actually breeds some level of security for the Nets, because teams deal with something different every other day.
Yeah, for sure. I think to do that, to say that as part of the thought experiment, you have to say that the Nets have the equal chance to have something happen. So that's why I kind of don't use that part. I don't use that part.
That's like, fair. That's not my biggest
part of the process. Because you can't like assume that something else will happen for the, I mean, I guess something did already happen for the Nets. They lost Durant. All right, this will make me feel better. It's a new year. So that means New Year's resolutions. I'm going to resolve to actually feel a lot better about this Brooklyn Nets team, but I'm also going to resolve to get more fit. And that is where Built Bar comes and helps out. It's the protein bar. It tastes like a candy bar, but it's better than a candy bar because it's actually healthy for you. They have all the great flavors: cookies and cream, coconut, almond, peanut butter, brownie, raspberry. Again, they sound like candy bars or ice cream bars. They're not. These are protein bars with all the stats to back it up. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, just 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. That is what the doctor ordered. Built Bar. You have it as a snack. You can kind of have it as a meal substitute. It's there for when you need it and you know it's going to taste good. all the flavors. You're going to find something you like in there. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
So I'm going to save my relief for Brooklyn Nets fans until, because I like I said, I didn't doubt it. You probably have another couple of reasons why there's cause for concern. After the strength of schedule, which is not a zero-sum game, what's your next biggest problem for the Brooklyn Nets?
The next biggest problem, and I kind of just mentioned it a minute ago, is that they ran into a really bad year where like too many Eastern Conference teams want to make the playoffs and have a legit chance. And actually, this is actually the biggest problem, is that where it's going to make it hard, and this is where the non-zero piece actually, I think, even more for me comes in, is that if the Nets played in the Western Conference, I actually wouldn't be worried about it at all, because some of these Western Conference teams, like around the bottom, there's such a like steep precipice around like the 8 and 9 spot down to the play-in that like some of these teams, like the Lakers, kind of stink and they're like pretty firmly in the playoffs, right? So like, but the Nets, who are really good right now, there is only 5.5 games that separate the Nets from the Knicks, who right now are the 11th team, right? Out of the playoffs right now, out of the play-in game right now, if it started right now, 5.5 games. That's not a little amount, but it's not tons, right? Like it's not a huge spread. But we know the Knicks want to make the playoffs. The Hawks are below them at 18 and 25. Like they are not going to go into the tank with that team. Like that team is going to keep trying here for the rest of the season. So we know that they're not going to bottom out. There's really only 3 teams that are there's 3 teams in the East out of the 15 that probably want no business with the playoffs right now. Pacers, Pistons, Magic. Again, the problem is when you get down to the play-in, like there's just not enough spots. And so it's really going to end up being a dogfight around this bottom tier where these teams, there's just no one taking their foot off the gas. And so that is actually, again, I'm not saying the Nets are going to miss the playoffs. I need to be very clear about this. Someone's going to say that I'm saying that. I'm not saying it. I think that if I was betting now, the odds would be really high that I would take about them making it. So that's not what I'm saying. But where it would have been like plus 10,000 that they miss or something like that, like in a regular thing, that's just not. And I looked everywhere for this number right now, but I just couldn't find live odds on it. That's just not where they are now. And a part of the reason is because this grouping of teams that do not want to be in the lottery because of their skill, like the players in their team and like their trajectories and stuff, is going to make this like, it's going to be a tougher road than I think I really anticipated. And I think that's the biggest reason for me.
Okay. It's not bad, but it's not good enough, Doug. It's still 0. And here's why. So the Nets have 39 games remaining, right? If we say that Kevin Durant is on a 4 to 6 week timeline, let's make it 8 weeks just to be fair around injuries and ramping back up and the Nets obscurity around that type of timeline. That would put them back 3/16, March 16th, right? Leaving them 12 games left in the season. So including the idea that some amount of those 12 games, even if it's ramping up, that you're going to get Kevin Durant back for 10-ish to 12-ish games, and the Nets have 39 remaining. Do you think that they could go, would 19 and 20 be an insane number to throw out for the next 39 games if we think we're going to have Kyrie for road games, possibly, and this is a possible, we can leave it off the table if you want, some form of Joe Harris, and also Kevin Durant for the last 10 games?
No, that's not crazy. They should be a 500 team with this squad easy, I would say. Right. So I think that's, again, like that's a realistic, I'm taking a realistic temperature. I'm gonna pivot this in 1 second, but like I'm hearing you on that. Like if you put it that way, yes.
Well, no, here's the deal.
Yeah.
So let me lay it out, and I'll recouch it too. Doug is just saying it's not a 0% chance they don't make it. This is not Doug saying it's more likely they don't make it than make it. So we'll try that. We'll try to drill it home to people, Doug. But obviously, you're going to get
it won't matter
in the comments. That's the way this works.
Like it won't matter.
So here's my thinking behind it though. If you couch it in that, which I think is pretty reasonable, right? The Nets went. You take away the games before Kyrie came back. They were 25 and 14 without Kyrie Irving. So with James Harden, Kevin Durant, and some amalgamation in and around them. And by the way, both those guys missed some time as well, but they were 25 and 14. The 19 and 20 record would get them to 46 wins. In order for the Nets to miss the play-in game, to miss that 10th spot as it's currently constructed, which is Boston right now, these teams ahead of them going in ascending order, including the Hawks would have to run 29 and 10 over the remainder of their season. That's a 750 win percentage. The Knicks need to go 25 and 13, 24 and 13 for the Celtics. The Raptors 26 and 15 because they have a couple more games. The Wizards 24-14, and the Hornets would have to go 23-15 for each of those teams to get to 47 wins and overtake the Brooklyn Nets. Now, do I think it's possible that some of those teams are going to pass the Nets? Yes. Like we obviously, I think we kind of would be fairly presumptuous in saying Cleveland and Milwaukee and the 76ers are probably going to get over top of the Nets over the course of Kevin Durant's absence. And the Hornets can probably get there too. So maybe it's the 6th, 7th, and then we're going to get into the Wizards here in a second and their importance of some games here. Maybe that comes into it too. But the idea that those, and you obviously don't need to include the Knicks or the Hawks, but at least the Knicks would have to get there too. All of those teams need to run what I'll call pretty hot in order. Those are all 650, 600 win percentages over the remainder of the season to overtake the Brooklyn Nets. And the best benefit about it, Doug, to your point, is in a competitive Eastern Conference, these guys all play each other. So every time that you think you can pick up a couple of wins here and a couple of wins there, somebody's going to be a winner or a loser. So even if, let's say, Boston, who I think has finally figured themselves out, winners of the 7 of their last 10, if you look at Boston and say, hey, guess what? When I check out their schedule and I run down that they're going to pick up Charlotte in their very next game, they have the Hawks. They have Charlotte again. Detroit, Orlando. Okay, fine. They're going to take on us. The Hawks again. A couple of Detroits, Pacers, Hawks again, Hornets again. They have 3 meetings. Just the Hornets matchups alone. Right there, depending on which way that series goes, all of a sudden the Nets gain a little bit of security. So I think when you look inside the schedules for these teams and see who they have to take on, some of these guys, at least 2 or 3, Knicks and Raptors, let's say, maybe the Hornets or maybe it's the Wizards, 2 out of these 3 teams are going to end up basically treading water as well based on who they have to play. And I just cannot see a world where 5 teams perform at that high of a level over the remainder of their schedules in order to get over top of the Nets. Now, I'm basing it on the Nets going 19-20, and I think that that's pretty reasonable. Could they be a couple of games worse? Sure, and that could make things look a little bit more dangerous, but they also could be a couple of games better. There's easily a world where the Nets get a couple of games above 500 over the remaining 39, especially if you think that the timeline on Kevin Durant could be a week sooner. So instead of 12 games, it could be 18 or 19 games, and that would impact it as well.
You went all positive when you think the Nets are going to bring a guy back sooner than his timeline. So
no. But even well, yeah, listen, I can't. No, but you know what I mean. Like if the timeline is 4 to 6, say
or we sprinkle fairy dust on all the players. If we get fairy dust, and we can sprinkle on all the players. If we're wishing for things that if we're wishing for things that are impossible.
But even give them 7 weeks, right? Like I said, 8 weeks would give 12 games. 7 weeks gets you to 15 or 16 games, and if he's back at any capacity, and you're talking about playing some, there's some bottom feeders at the back end of the Nets schedule. All the Nets have to do is basically be at 500 for the remainder of the season with some form of Joe Harris coming back a little bit, Kevin Durant coming back a little bit. They go 500. It's a 0% chance that they miss the playoffs.
All right. I'm not panicking here, but I will say
it's worth bringing up though. That's what I will say.
The Nets fans we need to watch now. Nets folks need to watch is a couple things. One, you want those teams above the Nets to you're cheering for the Bulls now. Start cheering for the Bulls. I'm being serious. Start cheering for the top of this Eastern Conference because you need, especially when they're playing some of these other teams, right? You need them to help separate some of this stuff. And so we're not just rooting for all Eastern Conference teams to lead. The teams that are just not going to drop, basically, probably not short of an injury, like the Bulls. Although they're missing Levine, the Heat who are actually getting healthier now, the Cavs, we need to be rooting for those teams. Also, this game against Washington actually kind of now matters a little more than I probably would have thought it would have, right? This game on Wednesday against Washington, I'm going to want to watch this game more closely, not because I want to see how the teams match up, but this is just the kind of game that the Nets need to win, right? This is the exact opponent that the Nets need to kind of dumpster a little bit here going forward. These other teams below them, they really need to start winning out these games just to avoid the panic later. That's all I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to avoid panic later by trying to look at what needs to happen now. All right. I hope that came off clear. Go ahead, and then we'll get out of here.
No, just and quickly, that's all these the Wizards games are good ones to circle. Any games against any teams that are in and around them. Those are the most important ones for the Nets to win. Circle the games against the Hornets and against the Raptors and against the Celtics. And I'll give in the caveat that the Nets will have 13 games, 2 against the Hornets, 2 against the Wizards, 2 against the Raptors, 3 against the Celtics, 3 against the Knicks, and 1 against the Hawks. Those 13 games over the remainder of the entire season, where Kevin Durant could come back at some point, would be without Kyrie because those are home games. So those are home games.
Say those are the games. Those are the games you circle because those are now the most important ones. Like those will tell.
And
the
those
whole
happen
season.
to be
like
all the that's the Eastern Conference. So it does make it pretty important that the road games you can win, you really get out there and get after it, friends.
All right, gonna start rooting a little harder. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Appreciate all the comments over on YouTube. Appreciate everyone that's logging in, or excuse me, logging in. Jeez, that's everyone that's subscribing over there. The numbers we've seen the numbers actually jump up a little bit over the last couple of days on YouTube, which is awesome. So go and subscribe to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. I will put that link in the show notes.
I love everybody. We're going to be shouting out some names going forward here because I appreciate what everyone's been doing on social media, on YouTube, on Twitter. It's all good stuff. But hey, here's something to remember. The enemy of my enemy, that's my friend.
Oh,
it's an unsubscribed quote, but it carries weight, I think.
Really? That's not attributed to anybody?
There's a lot of speculation. I mean, I want to say it was me, but I feel like it trends back a little bit further. Someone said Mark Cuban once. That can't be totally accurate. And I heard it in a movie once.
Feels like it predates Cuban over there. All right, whatever. Whoever said it, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Maju Krupp.
Too late. Oh, you're still recording.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
That's it.